My son banned me from his wedding, but then he had the gall to mail me an $80,000 invoice for the celebration and a luxury honeymoon in Hawaii. He even scribbled, "Thank me for letting you contribute." I didn't rage. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there and felt my anger freeze into something sharper and steadier. If Adrian wanted a flawless, money-soaked fairy tale, he was about to learn what happens when you write your father out of the story and still expect him to bankroll it. It was a grey, salt-scented afternoon in my bungalow on the east side of Portland, the kind of October light that makes the river look like brushed steel. I'd been fixing a loose hinge on the pantry when the mail slot clacked. Among flyers and a water bill was a thick cream envelope with Adrian's meticulous print. No return address, just my name, Mr. Rafael Mendez. It looked like a wedding invitation should look. Tasteful, expensive, a little smug. After months of silence between us, I let myself feel a pinprick of hope. Maybe this was a peace offering. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe I'd finally hear him say, "Dad, I want you there. Walk in with me." I slit it open carefully, ready for embossed cardstock and a date, a venue, an olive branch. Instead, paper slid into my hands, stiff, crisp, and insultingly professional. Itemized bills, totals circled. $80,000, my eyes tracked the neat columns, each line a punch. $50,000 for a historic estate rental outside the city limits. Ravencrest Manor, the kind of place where the hedges are squared like chess pieces and chandeliers drip from ceilings like frozen rain. $20,000 for catering. Imported wines, oysters, lobster flown in overnight. $10,000 for a honeymoon suite on Maui, with private beach access and an oceanfront plunge tub. At the bottom, a note in Adrian's handwriting. "Dad, after the problems you've caused, be grateful I'm letting you contribute. This covers your share. Send the check ASAP. Bianca and I are counting on it." I held the page a moment, fingertips cool against the paper. Problems. I could still hear the last real fight we'd had. Adrian spitting that word at me like a tooth he'd ripped out. Problems meant I didn't climb higher after his mother died. Problems meant I kept a sensible car and a small paid-off house. Problems meant I wore a jacket until the cuffs thinned instead of chasing titles that came with cufflinks. On the counter beside the mail, a small brass frame held a sun-faded photo of Adrian at 9, front teeth gapped, baseball cap crooked, his tiny hand hooked in mine at a city park. The boy who used to call me Papa when he was tired had become a man who decided I wasn't presentable enough for his curated life, yet presentable enough to pick up his tab. Shock came first, then the sizzle of humiliation, quick and mean. I crumpled the note in my fist until it crackled like old leaves. Then I smoothed it out and laid it flat, because I wasn't going to be the man who acted on the first heat of anger. I have learned the hard way that fury burns bright and fast, but resolve glows low and long. I rinsed my hands at the sink, cold water biting my skin. The kitchen felt smaller, crowded by memories of arroz con pollo bubbling on the stove, of birthday candles and hand-drawn cards, of my late wife Marisol humming along to boleros while she chopped cilantro. We lost her to cancer in 2016. I took extra shifts, fought with insurance, sold the beat-up truck I loved to cover the gaps. Adrian was 26 then, already crowned prince of some tech team, already telling me what I should have done if I'd wanted a different outcome. "You should have made more." "Dad," he'd said on the night we buried her, eyes red and hard. "Better care, better chances. You should have done more." Some things once said, never stop echoing. I dried my hands and reached for the old pocket watch that was my father's, a heavy thing with a scarred face and a chain polished by decades of thumbs. It ticked quietly in my palm. There are bonds you honor and bonds you sever. Adrian had taken a pair of shears to ours. He and Bianca didn't want an old widower in a thrift store suit among their venture capital friends. Fine, but I wasn't an ATM. I was a father. And fathers teach, even when their children think they're too grown to learn. I sat at the small table, took a breath, and let the anger settle until what remained was focus. A plan small at first began to sketch itself in the corners of my mind. No scenes, no screaming on the phone, no pleading for an invitation I didn't want anymore. If Adrian wanted to deal in contracts and invoices, then we'd deal in logistics, stakeholders, and pressure points. I opened my old laptop. The fan whirred like a tired cicada. Adrian keeps his socials locked down. Always has, even before promotions taught him to measure every post. Bianca, on the other hand, curates public adoration like it's a career. Her Instagram was right where I expected it. Filtered sunsets, glossy brunches. Gratitude captions that read like thinly veiled boasts. I scrolled until Ravencrest Manor filled my screen. Arched windows. A ballroom big enough to land a small plane inside. Can't wait to say I do at the timeless Ravencrest, Bianca had written. Blessed. The date, December 12th, 2025, not far off. She'd tagged vendors. An upscale farm-to-table caterer boasting a 200-guest capacity. A florist known for installations that looked like they were conceived by a forest and a museum curator. A photographer named Laia Voss, whose gallery was so luminous it made rain look like diamonds. I made notes on a yellow pad. Venue, Ravencrest Manor. $50,000 rental. Caterer Highland and Root, 200 guests. Photographer Laia Voss, planner. I scanned the comments and there he was. Seamless Events by Celeste Ward. I clicked through. The website was a smooth scroll of glassy testimonials and featured spreads from glossy magazines. For discerning clients who expect everything to go right. I clicked Contact. A polished headshot, Celeste in black minimalist jewelry, confidence sharpened to a point. The kind of person who prides herself on anticipating chaos and evaporating it before anyone smells smoke. I leaned back, tasting the bitter edge of the cheap red wine I'd poured more out of ceremony than need. No direct confrontation with Adrian yet. He'd swagger, deflect, use words like duty and family while he kept me at arm's length. Better to pull a thread where the fabric couldn't help but pucker. I found Celeste's number, stared at it, listened to the quiet tick of the watch. Then I dialed. Ward & Co. Events, a voice said. Clean, expensive, as if it had been ironed. This is Celeste. Ms. Ward, good afternoon, I said. My name is Rafael Mendez. I'm Adrian Mendez's father, the person expected to cover the remaining balance. A beat, then sugar. Mr. Mendez. What a pleasure. Adrian mentioned you'd be finalizing some items. Bianca's vision is truly exquisite. Ravencrest will be unforgettable. I'd prefer to discuss final details in person, I said. There are clarifications I need before I authorize any payment. Of course, she purred. I can see you tomorrow, 10 a.m., our office on Naito Parkway. Does that work? It does. We exchanged the usual niceties. When I hung up, I let the phone rest in my palm a moment. My heart wasn't pounding. My breathing was steady. Good. A steady hand writes cleaner lines. I stood and looked around my small kitchen as if seeing it afresh. The oak table I refinished myself. The scuffed tile Marisol and I chose because it reminded her of her grandmother's house. The magnet on the fridge shaped like a chili pepper that always made her laugh. I set the invoice on the table, folded once, then again. I wasn't going to toss it into a drawer. I was going to make it irrelevant. I changed the channel in my head to something productive. Gather facts, map the event, identify the choke points. People who sell seamlessness sell it by the hour and they panic when the clock slips. I opened a new page and wrote, vendors, list them, contacts, deposits paid, balances outstanding, cancellation policies. Leverage, plenty. Exposure, selective. Optics, leave that to them. Perfect images can't hide cracks big enough to swallow chairs. I checked Bianca's feed again, this time slower, reading captions like a detective reads a grocery list. She'd posted a video of a gown fitting, the one, and a selfie of champagne flutes with the caption, Daddy says only the best. Comments flooded with hearts and sparkles. I didn't bother looking for my name there. I won't find it. The house settled around me with the small familiar clicks of old wood and older pipes. I took my blazer off its hanger, brushed the shoulders, laid out a clean shirt. Not to impress Celeste, just to show up like a man who can look someone in the eye and say no. I poured a second glass of wine and sat by the window where the street lamps were starting to flare. Across the street, the neighbor boy practiced ollies on his skateboard. The clack and pop steady, determined. He fell once, twice, kept going. I smiled without thinking. Resolve isn't loud. It's repetition. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. I would sit across from a woman whose business model was control and timing, and I would remove the most crucial piece from her table, certainty. Not to humiliate, not to grandstand. To teach love that turns into entitlement needs boundaries. And sometimes a boundary looks like a neat. Impossible, no. I set an alarm, washed the wine glass, and put the envelope back on the counter where I could see it when I left in the morning. Not as a bill to be paid, but as evidence. By the time I returned, I intended for those numbers to have lost their power. Ward and Cubber's events sat high in a glass box on Naito Parkway, the Willamette sliding past like a sheet of pewter just beyond the windows. The lobby smelled faintly of eucalyptus and printer toner. At exactly 10 a.m., a receptionist in minimalist black led me into a conference room where every surface gleamed. Her single peony floated in a bowl of water, an aesthetic flex that whispered, "We sweat the details." Celeste Ward entered as if the room stood when she did. Tall, precise, eyes the cool gray of an incoming storm. "Mr. Mendez," she said, offering a hand with immaculate nails. "I love punctuality. Comes from tightening bolts for a living," I said. "If you don't show up on time, the bridge sags." A flicker that might have been amusement crossed her face. "Let's keep Ravencrest vertical, then." She slid a leather folder toward me. "Here are the outlines. Venue, catering, florals, photography, entertainment, transportation. Deposits placed, balances due. My team runs a zero-surprise model. We don't let things drift." I opened the folder. Contracts and timelines sat in color-coded tabs. Ravencrest Manor. Deposit received, balance $35,000, due T21 days. Highland and Route. Deposit received, balance $12,000, due T14 days. Laya Voss Photography. Retainer paid, balance $5,500, due event week. A string quartet, a DJ, a vintage Rolls rental, a tent vendor on standby in case of rain. The machine had been assembled with care. "I notice one surprise already," I said, keeping my voice even. "I were told I would finalize and contribute. What you weren't told, I am not invited to this wedding. I was banned. I received an invoice, not an invitation, along with a note advising me to be grateful for the chance to underwrite it. Celeste didn't reach for a platitude. Points for that." She folded her hands, ringless. "I was under the impression family relations were delicate." She chose the word like she was choosing a fabric swatch. "I didn't know you were excluded." "Now you do," I said. "Which means you also know I won't be paying a nickel." Her gaze didn't flinch, but I saw the tick of calculation behind her eyes, the margin notes rearranging themselves. "Contracts are contracts, Mr. Mendez. Deposits are non-refundable. Without the remaining balances, certain vendors will pull. Ravencrest will release the date at T7 if outstanding invoices aren't settled. My team's job is to prevent that. Your job," I said gently, "is to build events that make families feel like they live inside a magazine for an afternoon. My job, since my son prefers transactional language, is to make sure I'm not paying for my own erasure." Silence held for a breath. "What are you asking?" "Simple," I said. "You will inform Adrian that no further funds will be coming from me. If he wants a conversation, he can have one. With me, face to face, without Bianca translating. Until then, treat every balance as uncertain. And if he tells you I'm bluffing, remind him that uncertainty is contagious. It spreads through vendors, timetables, delivery windows. Ravencrest cannot host an event that can't prove solvency. This is going to create turbulence," she said. "That's air," I said. "Your pilots can handle it." She exhaled through her nose. "I will document our conversation and notify the client that financing is unresolved. That's as far as my lane allows. That's far enough." I stood. To her credit, Celeste rose as well. "Mr. Mendez," she said as I reached the door, "I've done this long enough to recognize when the wrong people are asked to fix the wrong things. I hope your son calls." "So do I said, "for his sake." Outside, the cold had a bite that felt bracing after the climate-controlled diplomacy. I walked a few blocks before pulling out my phone. If I was going to run this like a project, I needed more than leverage. I needed eyes. The name came to me the way old songs do, unbidden, intact. Mateo Cruz. He was once Adrian's shadow. My front porch often held both boys, one sanding a skateboard, the other dismantling a radio to see how it worked. Life rerouted them. Adrian climbed ladders. Mateo enlisted, then came back with a camera's patience and enough quiet to make people talk. Last I heard, he was doing private investigative work, surveillance for attorneys, background digs for small businesses, the occasional wedding videography on the side to keep the lights on. I scrolled until Cruz Mateo appeared. I hadn't called in years. I pressed. "Rafa?" he answered, voice warm with surprise. "Man, if this isn't a ghost." "You all right?" "I've been better," I said. "You got time to meet an old man for coffee?" "For you?" "Always," he said. "Where?" "Pine and Anchor on Mississippi." 30 minutes. "Make it 20, he said, and hung up. Pine and Anchor was a narrow shoebox of a cafe painted in chalkboard black, with a pastry case that made people betray their resolutions. I grabbed a corner table. Matteo arrived in 15, taller than I remembered, hair cropped short, a camera bag on one shoulder, and a not-quite smile he wore like a shield. "Rafa," he said, pulling me into a hug that surprised me with how much I needed it. "I'm sorry about Marisol. I was out of state when she passed. I should have called. You were chasing your own ghosts," I said. "Sit. Let me buy you a bad influence." I nodded at the pastry case. "2, he said, grinning now. "1 to honor Mrs. Mendez." We carried coffee and sugar to the table. I told him the story. Start to present. The envelope, the invoice, the band, Celeste, the line I'd drawn. He listened the way he always had, head tilted, fingers steepled, eyes not leaving mine. When I finished, he sighed. "Adrian always thought he could set the terms of reality by declaring them," he said. "Back in high school, I caught him submitting my code as his. He said it made more sense for him to present. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Join the club," I said, "so what do you need?" His tone shifted. Soft edges traded for clean lines. "Names, faces, documentation?" "Eyes and ears," I said. "If this turns into a mess, and it will, I want a record I control. I want to know when vendors balk and when guests realize the fantasy's leaking at the seams. I want to know if Adrian tries to spin this as a misunderstanding, so I can counter with receipts. I don't want to shame him. I want to stop him from steamrolling." "Copy," he said. "Event date?" "December 12th. He took out a small notebook and wrote it down, blocky and neat. "Ravencrest is hard to cover from the outside. The property's long security guards at the entry, and they're prickly about uninvited media since that influencer fiasco last spring. But there are service roads and a staff lot on the south side. If I'm discreet, I can catch arrivals, deliveries, and vendor chatter. I've also got a Zoom that could read the year off a penny at 50 yards. You always did love your toys," I said. "They love me back." He sobered. "You sure you want to do this? Weddings bring out the worst in everyone. If I document a collapse, there's no stuffing that toothpaste back in the tube." "I'm sure," I said. "I'm not weaponizing humiliation. I'm creating a boundary. If he backs off, I pull you off. If he presses, threats, smear, more invoices, we keep a ledger of truth." "Understood," he said, finishing his croissant with military efficiency. "I'll set up a shared drive. You'll have a live feed when I'm on site, plus uploads of stills and audio. I'll also poke the vendor tree from my end. An old client of mine is a lighting tech who freelances for Ravencrest. He hears everything. We settled logistics like we were planning a camping trip. Comms, drop points, battery backups, contingency plans for rain. When the details felt tight enough to walk on, Matteo reached across the table and squeezed my forearm. "You gave me a place to crash when my dad left," he said. "I never forgot. Let me repay a piece of that." "You repaid it by not turning into a man who sends his father an invoice," I said. "But I'll take the help," he laughed. "You always did know how to throw a punch without moving your hands." We parted with a hug and a promise to text when he'd lined up his access points. I stepped back into a sky the color of dishwater and headed home. My house greeted me with the familiar click of the deadbolt and the warmer whisper of a life lived here. The scuff of my chair against tile, Marisol's apron still hanging on the pantry knob, the framed prints of bridges I'd crossed and repaired. It didn't feel small now. It felt steady. The phone buzzed on the counter. "Adrian," I let it ring through. It rang again. "Bianca." I turned the volume down and made coffee, standing over the filter like it was a small ritual at an ancient altar. The voicemail counter ticked up, 1, 2, 3. When the kettle stilled, I tapped the speaker and listened. "Dad," Adrian's voice began, smooth on top, frayed beneath. "Celeste says there's a funding question. Call me. We need to align. Align." As if this were a status meeting. The second was Bianca. "Raphael, this is getting petty. Do you understand how many people are counting on this? Vendors, family, my followers." A brittle laugh. "We can't stumble because you're—" "Upset," I sipped. The coffee was strong enough to stand a spoon in. The third voicemail came later, after I'd taken a long walk down to the river and back, the cold sharpening my lungs. It was shorter, flatter. "If you tank this," Adrian said, "don't call me again." I set the phone face down. Somewhere in the house, the old pocket watch ticked steadily on the mantel like it had decided, long before either of us were born, that the only way to get through time is one honest second at a time. I spent the next days preparing like I would for a critical inspection. I tested a small audio recorder Matteo had recommended and learned where it clipped best on a shirt without showing. I catalogued every document, invoice, text, email, voicemail, into folders labeled by date, vendor, and leverage. I called my bank and asked the manager to flag any transfer requests over $100. Nothing would accidentally slip through. I drafted a single clear message to Adrian and saved it in notes. "I love you. I will not fund an event I am banned from. If you want to talk face to face, I'm here. Otherwise, my answer is no." On a damp Tuesday, as the leaves plastered themselves to the sidewalks like gold coins no one had the heart to pick up, my front door rattled under a sudden knock, urgent, impatient. I glanced at the camera feed on my phone out of habit. Not Adrian, not Bianca. A man in a suit I didn't recognize, and a woman with a tablet hugged to her chest. When I opened the door, the man smiled the way debt does. "Mr. Mendez, I'm Jonah from Ravencrest Administration. This is Kira with Highland and Root. We're making rounds to sort a clerical issue. Might we have a moment?" I stepped aside and let them into the narrow entry where the umbrella stand always threatens to trip the unwary. My living room looked suddenly smaller with their brisk energy inside it. They sat. I remained standing. Jonah crossed an ankle over a knee that had never met manual labor. "There seems to be confusion," he said, glancing at Kira's tablet. "We've been told you're the designated guarantor. Our systems need confirmation to keep your son's date in good standing." "Your systems," I said, "need to hear a complete sentence. I am not the guarantor of any event at Ravencrest." Kira's eyes flicked up. "Without a guarantor, our policies require reclassification, service levels shift, menus shift." "Things shift," Jonah echoed, like a man who'd learned empathy by rote. "We'd hate for that to happen this close to the date." "I imagine you would," I said. "Here's my confirmation. I will not be paying. I was banned from the wedding. An invoice was sent to me anyway. If Ravencrest wishes to protect itself, it should request updated proof of funds from the contracted party." Jonah's smile faltered. "This does place us in a difficult position. Not as difficult as mine would be if I signed a check to someone who sent me a bill and a ban in the same breath," I said. Kira, to her credit, let out a breath that misted the air between us. "We'll update the file," she said. "Thank you for the clarity." They left faster than they'd arrived, politeness forestalling panic. I watched from the window as they stood on the sidewalk conferring, then split, one to their car, the other dialing with quick stabbing fingers. Somewhere across town, Celeste's calm would be curdling. Somewhere in a different part of town, Adrian would feel the ground tilt. My phone buzzed. Matteo. "Heard Ravencrest is spooked. Lighting tech says the word hold just got tossed around a lot. I'll be at the South Gate on the 12th by 7 a.m. Bring coffee if you swing by," I typed back. "Make it 2, 1 for Marisol." Then I put the phone down and let the house be quiet around me. Boundaries, I reminded myself, aren't walls you build to keep love out. They're doors you close so you decide who walks through and why. On December 8th, 4 days before the wedding, Adrian finally called at a time he knew I'd be home. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Dad," he said, skipping greeting, barreling into agenda. "We need to resolve this. You can't just—" "Son," I said, and the word felt like a hinge that still moved. "You can come here and talk to me like a son talks to a father. Or you can keep talking to me like a bill collector. One gets coffee. The other gets hung up on." Silence. The sound of a man deciding which role he wanted to play. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. "Doors open," I said, and hung up before my voice could soften into something he'd mistake for surrender. An hour later, the knock came. Not rushed, not desperate, but measured. I opened the door to find Adrian standing there in a charcoal suit, no tie, his jaw set. Even at my front steps, he couldn't arrive without an image. Bianca wasn't with him. That was the first good sign. "Come in," I said. He stepped inside, glanced around as if cataloguing the unchanged furniture, the same couch with the sagging cushion, the framed bridges, the little clay sun Marisol once made at a pottery class. His eyes lingered on nothing long. "You look well," I said. He smirked faintly, a reflex more than a reply, and sat at the edge of the armchair as though afraid of catching humility. I took my usual seat across, folded hands. "Coffee?" "No." "Let's just talk." "Good," I said, "because I'm tired of voicemails." He shifted, pulling the crease of his suit pants taut. "Dad, you don't understand the scale of this. A wedding at Ravencrest isn't just about us. It's about positioning, about family legacy. Bianca's investors will be there, my VP. This is exposure. One day when I'm up for partner, this kind of polish matters." "You want me to pay for polish," I said. "It's not about money." He leaned forward, voice sharpening. "It's about image, respect. You showing support instead of whatever this is." "Support?" I repeated. "You banned me from attending. You reduced me to a line item. You told me to be grateful for it. That isn't support, Adrian." "That's a transaction," he bristled. "Don't twist it. You've always had this chip on your shoulder about not making enough. I'm trying to elevate this family name, to show we can belong in those circles." I let silence stretch until it was taut. "Son, your mother believed we belonged anywhere we stood as long as we stood together. You've confused belonging with buying." His jaw clenched, the muscle twitching. "You think staying small is noble. It's not. It's pathetic." The word landed sharp. I breathed once, twice. Let it slide past instead of lodge. "Do you know what pathetic looks like?" I asked softly. "It looks like a man begging the father he disinvited to write a check so strangers don't whisper about the drapes at his wedding." That shut him up. For a moment. Finally he said quieter, "I thought you'd do this without question. That's what parents do." "Parents raise children," I said. "They don't fund delusions. I gave you everything I could after your mother died. I took double shifts, skipped vacations, sold my truck. And still you stand here telling me I owe you 80,000 more so you can impress people who won't remember the floral arrangements by dessert." He looked down then at his polished shoes, the shine reflecting the low lamp glow. His voice when it came was almost boyish. "If this falls apart, Bianca will never forgive me." "That," I said, "is between you and Bianca. What's between you and me is this. I will not pay for a seat I'm not allowed to sit in. I will not bankroll my own absence." His head lifted sharply. "So that's it? You'd rather see me humiliated?" "No," I said, standing. "I'd rather see you humbled." His eyes flashed, then dulled. He rose too, brushing invisible lint off his sleeve. "You'll regret this when people talk." "I've survived worse talk," I said, "and at least when they talk about me, they'll say I kept my dignity." He opened his mouth as if to volley one last insult, but stopped. Something flickered there. Anger, yes, but also a shadow of doubt. He muttered, "Fine," and walked out, the door clicking harder than necessary. I stayed still, listening as his car started, reversed, drove off. The quiet that followed felt like the house itself exhaling. 2 days later, Matteo called. "Rafa, it's unraveling faster than I expected. Ravencrest froze half the arrangements pending funds, caterers threatening to cut the menu to Buffett style, the florists gossiping that Bianca's panicking. You want photos?" "Document everything," I said. He chuckled. "Oh, I am. Got shots of delivery vans turning around, workers hauling crates back in the rain. You'd think it was a rehearsal for a tragedy." I almost smiled. "Good. Keep the files tight. No leaks until we decide." That evening, I sat at my desk flipping. Through the folder I'd organized, invoices, voicemails, copies of Bianca's posts. One caught my eye. A filtered photo of her gown in a boutique mirror captioned, "Every princess deserves her castle." The comments were full of adoration. I wondered how many of those admirers would whisper when the castle walls started cracking. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later I played it. "Mr. Mendez, this is Aaron from Highland and Root Catering. We're getting mixed messages about the balance. Please confirm you're not responsible. Otherwise, we'll need assurances in writing by tomorrow. I called back. Aaron, thank you for checking. Confirm on record I am not the guarantor. Any balance must be addressed with Adrian Mendez or his fiancée. He sighed. Figured. Just wanted it clear before we waste more oysters. The relief in his voice was its own victory. By December 12th, the weather itself had chosen sides. Sheets of rain turned Ravencrest's manicured lawn into a swamp. Mateo's feed buzzed on my phone. Photos of tents sagging, guests crowding the entry in damp suits and dresses, whispers darting like minnows. Vendors walking out, one of his captions read. Florist packed up at noon. Caterer cutting half the spread. Guests grumbling. I ignored 3 consecutive calls from Adrian. Listened instead to the voicemails. Dad, please, just wire it. They're about to cancel. Everyone's watching, then, you're ruining my life. Do you understand what this looks like? Finally, this fine, don't pay. But when I'm done with this family, don't say I didn't warn you. His voice cracked on that last one, like glass under stress. I sat back, the ticking of my father's watch loud in the quiet. Justice doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like silence, while someone learns they can't cash checks written on contempt. I poured a cup of coffee and stared out the rain-streaked window. Ravencrest might still host vows, but the shine had dulled, the seams had split, and every guest there would know money couldn't keep the storm out. And for the first time in years, I felt taller in my own skin. The next knock at my door came not from vendors or strangers, but from neighbors. Mr. Ellis from across the street, raincoat dripping, voice gruff but kind. Heard about the mess at Ravencrest, he said. Word is your boy's been shouting at staff, trying to strong-arm discounts. Folks are shaking their heads. Just wanted to tell you you did right. Pride matters? I nodded, throat tight with gratitude. Thank you. It means more than you know. That night, when the storm finally broke and the streetlights shimmered on puddles, I sat in my armchair with the old photo of Adrian at 9 in my lap. Gapped teeth, baseball cap, his hand in mine. I whispered to that boy, I hope one day you find your way back, but if he didn't, at least I had found mine. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle the night they came. I was halfway through a bowl of soup, when the pounding on my door rattled the frame. Not polite knocks this time, urgent, almost frantic. Through the peephole I saw them, Adrian and Bianca, coats thrown over what looked like ruined finery, hair damp, faces pale. Bianca's gown peeked absurdly beneath her trench, lace muddied at the hem. I opened the door a crack. What are you doing here? Adrian pushed forward, water dripping from his sleeves onto my entry rug. Dad, let us in. The wedding's a disaster. Vendors pulled out, guests left. Ravencrest is threatening lawsuits. We need to talk. Bianca hovered behind him, mascara streaked, voice trembling. Please, Mr. Mendez, if we can just salvage something. The honeymoon's booked, deposits gone. We can't lose it all. I stepped aside slowly. They entered dripping, the air between us thick with the scent of wet fabric and desperation. They stood in the hallway, awkwardly small now in the house Adrian had once called home. I folded my arms. You disinvited me, then demanded I pay. What exactly do you want from me now? Adrian's voice cracked. It was a mistake, okay? Bianca thought it was about optics, about not embarrassing us. But now everything's collapsing. Dad, we just need a transfer quick and we can fix some of this. Optics, I repeated. You erased me for optics. Bianca rushed in, eyes wide. We didn't mean it like that. It was stress. Everyone's been watching, expecting perfection. We panicked. I held their gaze unmoved. When your mother was dying, Adrian, do you remember me panicking? I worked overtime, sold my truck, fought with insurance while you shouted that it wasn't enough. And now you stand here again begging, but only because the show fell apart. Adrian flinched. Don't throw Mom at me. Don't you dare tell me who I can remember, I cut in firm. You blamed me once for not being enough. Now you blame me for not giving more. But not once have you treated me like a father since. Bianca's lips trembled. We're sorry. Please think of us. A family. Family, I asked. Family is who you stand beside, not who you invoice. Answer me honestly. If Ravencrest hadn't collapsed, if the guests hadn't whispered, would you be here right now? Silence. Adrian's eyes darted. His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. That was the answer. Go home, I said, voice low but steady. Learn from this. Dignity doesn't come from chandeliers. Respect isn't rented with lobster. It's earned moment by moment, by how you treat the people who would bleed for you. I won't fund your lesson. You've already paid for it in humiliation. Adrian's face twisted, torn between anger and defeat. So you'd rather see me ruined? No, I said. I'd rather see you grow. He opened his mouth again, but Bianca clutched his arm, whispering something sharp. He shut it, shoulders sagging. I walked to the door and opened it. Rain misted through the crack. Out. For a moment they just stood, dripping in my hallway, the silence heavy as stone. Then Adrian muttered, voice hoarse, I regret it. All of it. I gave him one long look. Then prove it. With your life, not my money. They stepped out into the rain, their footsteps splashing down the walk. I closed the door behind them, the latch clicking like a gavel. The house was quiet again. I sank into my armchair, listening to the faint hum of the fridge, the ticking of the pocket watch on the mantel. Outside, their car lights faded into the night until the street was dark again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small in my own home. I felt steady, whole. The fallout came quickly. Neighbors whispered about the debacle at Ravencrest. Vendors gossiped in industry circles. Photos surfaced of half-dressed halls, of drenched guests huddling under tents. A week later, Matteo handed me a file of everything he'd gathered. Audio of staff arguing, shots of the estate staff repacking china, footage of Adrian berating a delivery driver. He's sunk his own ship, Matteo said. I barely had to nudge. I leafed through the evidence, then closed the folder. Keep it, I don't need it now. The lesson's already burned in. Matteo studied me. You think he'll call again? Maybe, I said. Maybe not. But if he does, it won't be for money. Not anymore. That Sunday I walked to the park where Adrian had once played Little League, the same park where Marisol used to cheer with a thermos of coffee in her hands. I sat on the bench, listening to kids laugh on the swings, and let the cold air sting my lungs. For years, I'd carried the weight of not being enough. But as the sun broke through the clouds and painted the wet grass gold, I realized I'd done all I could. Dignity wasn't about their approval. It was about mine. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that sits heavy on your chest, waiting to see if it will turn into calm or into another storm. Word about the wedding spread faster than the rain that ruined it. Portland isn't a small town, but the circles Adrian and Bianca ran in thrived on gossip, disguised as networking. The Ravencrest debacle became cocktail chatter. Vendors whispered. Guests complained about wasted outfits and soggy shoes. People said unfortunate but thought embarrassing. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. One Tuesday morning, as I was pruning the roses out front, Mrs. Hargrove, my neighbor 2 doors down, walked over with her little terrier tugging at the leash. She lowered her voice like we were conspirators. Raphael, I heard, well, everyone's heard, the Ravencrest wedding. People said it was chaos. I just wanted to say what you did. Standing your ground? That took spine. I smiled faintly, clipping a thorny stem. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't saying no. It's staying with no after the begging starts. She patted my arm. I hope he realizes what you were teaching. So do I said, though I wasn't sure. A week later, Matteo stopped by with a thumb drive. He dropped it on my table next to the coffee mugs. Everything's here, audio, video, stills. You want to release it, you can. But I think it's already out there in pieces. Hadrian's been calling vendors incompetent to save face. Problem is, I've got footage of him screaming at a driver because an invitation had a crease. I picked up the drive, turned it over in my hand, then set it back down. Keep it safe. Maybe someday he'll need to see himself. But not yet. Matteo studied me. You're not even angry anymore, are you? I was, I said. But anger fades. What's left is something heavier. Disappointment. And maybe hope, if I'm honest. Hope he grows. Matteo nodded slowly. You're a better man than him. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm just a man who's had more time to fail and learn. On the second Sunday of January, I went to the Riverwalk where Marisol and I used to bring Adrian when he was little. The air was crisp, gulls wheeled overhead, and the water smelled faintly of salt and iron. I sat on a bench with a thermos of coffee, watching the joggers pass. I thought about how I used to dream of standing at Adrian's wedding, not for the spectacle but to see him happy, To know that despite everything, I'd given him the foundation to build a life on. Instead, I'd been given a bill. The irony didn't sting anymore, it just settled. That evening, as I was sorting through an old box of photos, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to answer. Hello? A pause, then a tentative voice. Dad, it's me. I sat very still, the photo of a 9-year-old Adrian in my hand. Hey, Adrian. His breath came shaky through the line. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the way I treated you. For the note. For everything. I don't know if you can forgive me. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of relief and caution. Apologies are a start. But words alone won't rebuild what you burned. I know, he whispered. Bianca left. Said I embarrassed her. She called off the honeymoon. I'm alone, Dad. And I realize I pushed away the one person who stood by me. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, I never wanted you ruined. I wanted you to see, to learn. Maybe now you will. Can I come by? He asked. I looked around my small living room. The old rug, the family photos, the watch ticking steadily on the mantel. Yes, I said softly. But not tonight, tomorrow. And you come as my son, not as a man with a bill. I promise, he said, his voice breaking. We hung up. I sat in the quiet, staring at the photo in my hand. For the first time in years, I felt something fragile but real flicker to life. Hope. The next day, when Adrian showed up at my door, he wore no suit. Just jeans and a sweater. He looked younger, stripped of pretense, almost like the boy from the photo. I let him in. We sat at the table, 2 mugs of coffee steaming between us. He didn't posture. He didn't lecture. He just said, tell me how to start over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like his father again. Adrian sat at my kitchen table like he had as a boy, but the weight in his shoulders was new. He stared into his coffee, swirling it absently, as though answers might appear in the steam. I don't know where to begin, he admitted. Begin with honesty, I said. It's cheaper than chandeliers. He cracked the faintest smile, then rubbed a hand over his face. After the wedding collapsed, Bianca was furious. She said I embarrassed her in front of her friends, her family, her investors. She packed her bags the next morning and left. No note, just gone. I sipped my coffee. And you? I tried to salvage things at work, but news travels fast. People at the firm know. Some think I'm reckless with money. Others say I let a small family drama tank a big event. Either way, I'm not the golden boy anymore. That bothers you, I said. Of course it does, he snapped, then softened. I've spent years building that image. And now, gone. I leaned back. An image built on borrowed credit never lasts. You wanted me to fund the illusion. I refused. And now you're left with yourself. That can be terrifying, but it's also a chance. He looked at me, really looked like he was trying to see something he'd missed before. How did you do it? After Mom? After losing so much and still staying upright? The question caught me. For years he'd only judged. Now he was asking. I stayed upright because falling wasn't an option, I said. I worked, I cooked, I kept the lights on. Dignity isn't about what others see. It's about what you refuse to surrender inside yourself. I refused to surrender being your father, even when you pushed me out. His eyes glossed, but he blinked it away. I don't deserve your patience. Maybe not, I said, but I'll give it anyway. Because you're my son, and because if I stop, you'll never learn the lesson life is screaming at you right now. Over the following weeks, Adrian started showing up more often, not in suits, not with demands, but with questions. One evening he asked, "Can I help you fix the gutter?" He held the ladder while I hammered, his silence different this time, steady, not resentful. Another Saturday he brought over groceries. "You always used to make arroz con pollo." "Show me how." So we cooked side by side, the kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and simmering chicken, the memory of Marisol hanging warmly in the air. Bit by bit the arrogance melted, leaving something I hadn't seen in years, humility. Of course it wasn't easy. He'd slip. One night he muttered, "If Bianca hadn't panicked, it would have worked." I stopped stirring the pot. "No, Adrian, it didn't work, because you believed appearances matter more than people. Don't blame Bianca. Don't blame me. Own it." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "You're right." And that was progress. Meanwhile, gossip about the wedding had faded into other scandals. Vendors moved on. Ravencrest booked another event. Bianca posted filtered vacation photos with hashtags about fresh starts, as if the collapse had never touched her. Adrian, though, had no such escape. His reputation at work was tarnished. Promotions slowed. Some colleagues avoided him. It was a bitter pill, but I watched him swallow it, and for once, he didn't spit blame. One Sunday, after we'd spent the morning repairing an old fence post in the yard, Adrian leaned on the shovel and said, "Dad, I'm thinking of selling the condo downtown. It's too much, too expensive, too empty." I studied him. "And what will you do instead?" "Find something smaller. Maybe in a quieter neighborhood, something I can actually afford. Something real," I nodded slowly. "That sounds like a man growing." He smiled, tired but genuine. "I think I want real more than I want perfect." That night after he left, I sat in my chair with Marisol's old photo album open on my lap. Pictures of us young and broke but happy. Of Adrian with frosting on his cheeks at his 5th birthday. Of family dinners in this very kitchen. I realized something. Maybe the bill he sent me wasn't the insult I thought. Maybe it was the trigger we both needed. The crack that let truth in. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel like Adrian's father. I felt like he was finally becoming my son again. By February, Adrian had sold the condo. The glossy high-rise that once symbolized his arrival now belonged to another eager young professional. He didn't talk much about the sale except to say, "It felt like cutting off a weight I didn't realize I was dragging." He rented a modest townhouse in a quieter part of Portland, close to a neighborhood park. The first time I visited, the place was half-furnished, boxes stacked in corners, a folding chair serving as his dining set. Still, it felt lighter than his old life. "Smaller," he said, handing me a mug of plain coffee. But mine, no show. No debt choking me. I nodded, sipping. That's worth more than any chandelier. As he settled, Adrian began reconnecting with people he'd pushed away. He reached out to Matteo. Their reunion was awkward at first, decades of friendship overshadowed by betrayal. But slowly they talked. Matteo told me later. He admitted what he did back in school. Said he stole my work, used me. That takes guts to confess. Adrian even showed up at a community event Mrs. Hargrove invited him to, something he would have sneered at months ago. He helped set up tables, poured coffee for retirees, and stayed until the end to sweep the floor. Watching from across the room, I felt a quiet pride bloom. For once, he wasn't the center of attention. He was part of the crowd, but just when I thought the healing had begun to settle, a familiar storm knocked at the door. One evening, as I was patching a loose step on my porch, Adrian's car pulled up. He stepped out slower than usual, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "She called me," he said without preamble. I didn't need to ask who. "Bianca," he added anyway. "She wants to meet. Said she regrets leaving, that she panicked, that she wants another chance." I leaned on the hammer. "And what do you want?" He hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the ground. "Part of me still loves her. Or maybe just the idea of her. But I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know if I can trust me." "Good," I said. He blinked. "Good?" "Yes," I said. "Good that you don't know. Because rushing back to what broke you isn't strength. It's fear of being alone. Questioning means you're learning." He sat on the step beside me, his voice softer. "She says people are talking less now. That we could rebuild, start fresh. But I think what she wants is the image back. The circle. The shine." "And what do you want?" I pressed. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he whispered, "I think I want peace. Real peace." "Then don't trade it for glitter," I said. A week later, Bianca showed up unannounced at his townhouse. Adrian called me after, voice shaking. "She looked perfect, like always," he said. I said she forgave me. Forgave me. Like she wasn't the one who left. "And what did you do?" I asked. I told her I'm done. That I need to build a life that doesn't collapse in the rain. I closed my eyes, relief flooding me. "That's the man your mother always believed you could be." In March, Adrian invited me to his townhouse for dinner. Nothing fancy. Spaghetti, salad, store-bought bread. He burned the sauce a little, but when he placed the steaming plate in front of me, he grinned like a boy again. "I wanted to do this for you," he said. "Not to impress, not to prove, just because you're my dad." I lifted my fork, the lump in my throat making it hard to swallow. Best meal I've had in years. We ate in silence for a while, the quiet comfortable this time. At the end of the night, as I was leaving, he hugged me. Not stiff, not obligatory, but real. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" I asked. "For not paying that bill." The irony wasn't lost on me. What once felt like betrayal had become the cornerstone of his rebuilding. Sometimes the best gift a father can give isn't money or approval or even presents. Sometimes it's refusal, the kind that forces growth. And as I drove home that night, I realized something else. I had grown too. I'd shed the guilt that I hadn't done enough. I'd reclaimed my dignity, and now I was watching my son reclaim his. Spring crept into Portland, with cherry blossoms blushing along the riverbanks. Adrian had begun walking more, he told me. Less driving, more grounding. "It helps me think," he said one Sunday, sipping coffee with me on my porch. That same week, he got a call that would test everything he'd been trying to rebuild. "Dad," he said over the phone, his voice tight. "My manager offered me a chance, a new project, high visibility, but, I prompted. He hesitated. "The team doesn't trust me. Not after the wedding fallout. They think I'm all about appearances." One guy even joked, "Don't let Adrian handle the budget or we'll be eating ramen at a 5-star hotel." I winced, though a small part of me thought he deserved that sting. "So what did you tell them?" "That I'd prove them wrong," he said. "But the truth is, I'm scared. I don't know if I can lead without slipping into the old habits." "You can," I said firmly, "but only if you stop treating leadership as spotlight and start treating it as stewardship. Don't polish, build." He was quiet for a long time. "Then, will you help me? Not with the project, but with how to approach it." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That's what fathers do, son." Over the next month, I watched Adrian transform. Instead of barking orders, he listened. Instead of hiding mistakes, he owned them. He started showing up early, staying late, not to impress, but to learn. One evening, he called me exhilarated. "Dad, I screwed up a calculation today, bad. Old me would have covered it up, blamed someone else. But I admitted it, fixed it, and you know what? The team respected me more for it." I chuckled. Imagine that. Respect isn't bought with lobster. It's earned with honesty. The real test came at the end of April, when his firm hosted a quarterly review. Adrian was asked to present his project's progress to senior partners. He invited me to come, not into the meeting, but to wait outside. "I just want you nearby," he admitted. So I sat in the lobby, the tick of my pocket watch steady against my palm, while upstairs my son stood under fluorescent lights and delivered not flash, but substance. No flowery slides, no exaggerated promises. Just data, clarity, and accountability. When he came down afterward, his face was pale, but his eyes were bright. They said I was solid. Not flashy, but solid. They said they could trust me. I stood, clapped his shoulder. "Solid builds bridges. Flash collapses in rain," he laughed, relief spilling out. "You always have a bridge metaphor ready, don't you?" "Occupational hazard," I said. A week later, he was officially commended in front of his team. For the first time in years, people weren't talking about his image. They were talking about his integrity. That night, over simple takeout at my kitchen table, Adrian lifted his glass of water like a toast. "To you," he said. I raised mine. "To growth," he smiled. "And to the bill you never paid." We clinked glasses, the sound soft but strong, like a promise. But growth, I knew, wasn't a straight road. And sure enough, temptation came knocking again. Not from work this time, but from Bianca. One evening in May, she showed up at his townhouse, flowers in hand, charm polished to perfection. Adrian called me after. She said she made a mistake leaving, that she wants another chance, that she misses what we had. "And what did you say?" I asked carefully. I told her I'm not the same man she left, and if she wants a second chance, it won't be with the old terms. "Good," I said, proud but cautious. "Did she accept that?" He sighed. "She said she'll think about it," which probably means no. "Then let her go," I said, "because you finally found yourself. Don't lose that again." For the first time, Adrian didn't sound heartbroken, just steady. "You're right," he said. "Peace is worth more than glitter." And in that moment, I knew he was finally starting to understand. By early summer, Portland was in bloom, parks alive with joggers, riverside patios buzzing with chatter. Adrian had settled into his townhouse, his work steadied, and our relationship, though scarred, felt like something living again. But peace rarely comes without one last test. It was a Friday evening when my phone rang. Adrian's voice was clipped. Dad, she's here, Bianca, she showed up again. I set down my book. At your door. Yes, with wine, with apologies, with promises. Said she wants to try again, that she's changed. She even cried. He exhaled sharply. I don't know if I should believe her. Do you want to? I asked. He hesitated. Part of me does. Part of me remembers what it felt like before everything, but another part of me feels like it's a trap. Then listen to that second part, I said quietly. Love that demands you erase your father for optics isn't love. It's leverage. The next day, Adrian asked me to come over. Bianca wanted to talk, with both of us, he said. Against my better judgment, I agreed, because sometimes you need to hear words spoken aloud to see their hollowness. When I arrived, Bianca was perched on his couch, elegance intact, as if the Ravencrest disaster had been a rumor instead of her undoing. Mr. Mendez, she greeted me, voice syrupy. I owe you an apology. We were wrong to exclude you. It was foolish, I repeated. No, it was deliberate. Her smile flickered, then steadied. I panicked. I thought appearances mattered more than bonds. But Adrian means everything to me. I want us to rebuild. I turned to my son. What do you think? Adrian's jaw was tight. He stared at her, then at me. I think I want honesty, not performance. Of course, Bianca said quickly. I can be honest. I've missed you terribly. I realize now. Stop, Adrian cut in. His voice was calm but firm. This isn't about missing me. This is about missing the image, the circle, the life you wanted to show off, and I can't give you that anymore. I don't want to. Her eyes widened. Adrian, no, he said. You left when things collapsed. You forgave me when I didn't ask for forgiveness, and now you're here because you think enough time has passed to start over. But I've started over already, without you. Bianca's face hardened, the softness gone in an instant. You'll regret this, she snapped. You'll realize you can't climb without me. Then I'll stay grounded, Adrian said. The silence after her departure was thick but clean. Later, as we sat on his small balcony overlooking the street, Adrian turned to me. I thought I'd feel empty, but I don't. I feel free. That's because you finally chose peace over glitter, I said. He smiled faintly. You were right. That bill, the one I sent you, it was the best thing you never paid. We sat there until the sky turned purple, listening to the city breathe. Weeks later, his firm promoted him, not to partner, not yet, but to lead a modest team. This time no champagne, no lavish announcements. Just a handshake and trust. And I could see he valued that more than any mansion rental or imported wine. For me, the victory wasn't his title. It was the way he called me after, voice steady and proud. Dad, I wanted you to be the first to know. I earned this, honestly. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man who had failed his family. I felt like a father whose lessons had finally landed. Summer deepened, and with it came a sense of steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Life slowed into its rhythms. Coffee on the porch, long walks along the river, Sunday dinners with Adrian in my kitchen. Not grand feasts, just simple meals cooked together. Laughter slipping back into the space where bitterness once lived. One Sunday, while we were clearing dishes, Adrian paused, plate in hand. You know, he said, if you had paid that bill, I don't think we'd be here right now. I dried a cup, set it on the shelf. If I had paid it, you'd still be chasing chandeliers. Sometimes love says yes, but sometimes love has to say no. He nodded slowly. The truth settling in his eyes. By August, he was flourishing in ways I hadn't dared imagine. His townhouse no longer echoed. It had books on the shelves, photos on the wall. Not glossy magazine spreads, but real snapshots. Mateo at a barbecue, co-workers laughing at a picnic, even one of me standing by the roses in my yard. Feels like home, I told him one evening. It is, he said. Then after a pause, because it's built on something real. Bianca made one last attempt, a postcard from Los Angeles, written in looping script. Hope you're doing well. You'll always be part of me. Adrian showed it to me, then tore it in half without a word. Growth doesn't always roar. It sometimes sounds like paper tearing softly in your hands. The whispers about the Ravencrest disaster eventually died down, replaced by fresher scandals. Life moved on. But inside me, something shifted permanently. I no longer carried the shame of not being enough, the guilt of failing Marisol, the ache of Adrian's rejection. I had stood firm, and in doing so I had reclaimed my dignity, and in refusing to pay, I had given my son something money never could. The chance to grow into a man who could finally face himself honestly. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped behind the West Hills, Adrian and I sat outside, mugs of coffee warming our hands. He looked at me not with resentment, not with arrogance, but with something I hadn't seen in years. "Respect, Dad," he said quietly. "Thank you. For not giving me what I thought I wanted. For giving me what I needed." I felt Marisol's presence in that moment, as if she were smiling from the shadows of memory. "That's what parents do," I said softly. We clinked our mugs, no fanfare, no chandeliers, just the steady glow of a bond reforged. And so the story that began with a bill ended not with ruin, but with renewal. My son had learned that dignity can't be bought, and I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. And in the quiet of that summer night, I realized I hadn't just saved my savings. I'd saved my son,